you really have to find your niche first. You find your niche, you make your mark, and then the doors open up from there. But it can be a very long time, and it can be very disheartening. Yeah, a good portion of it's luck, but the other big portion of it is just persistence. If you've got it, they'll find you.
Kia ora everyone. Joining me today is Andrew Paul Wood. Andrew is an art writer, cultural historian, literary critic, curator, translator and occasional poet, a jack of all trades. He is still learning after 20 plus years. Areas of expertise range from non-Anglo-European influences on culture in Aotearoa, the history of the pavlova, speculative and weird fiction, the decorative arts, design, art, architecture and fashion. Well, thanks so much for your time today and joining us, Andrew. You've got such an eclectic job. How do you explain to someone if they ask what exactly it is that you do?
Kia ora. I don't. I try not to. It's too much, and it's really hard, I think, in the context of Aotearoa to sort of explain that sort of thing. Anywhere else, you just in Europe and Australia, to an extent, it's a lot easier to explain. Oh, I work in the arts, or yeah, I'm a writer, or something like that. Whereas I find in Aotearoa, people seem to either they expect more of an explanation, and it's hard to convey sometimes.
Do you think we've got quite...
Everything. I just do everything in the arts. Everything. If there's a niche, I'll ram myself into it.
Nice. And so do you feel like there is quite a different arts and creative scene in New Zealand than there is internationally?
Yeah, it's a lot smaller, and everyone knows everyone else. In some ways, it's a lot more competitive because there are so fewer platforms and funding resources, and most of it's contestable. On other ways, it's a lot more supportive, and because it's in some ways it's like a big family, and you have your close friends, and you have your people who believe in getting things out there, and you have your odd weird uncle, and you just either pull together for things and support each other. But yeah, I mean, it can be really competitive as well when you're fighting over those limited Creative New Zealand grants, for instance.
Of course. How has your role evolved over time? Where did you start out on your creative journey?
I was always a creative kid, I guess. I drew all the time and read a lot. And, growing up pre-internet, only just, there were fewer distractions, so you could focus on those sorts of things, and they were really important. And I would join into competitions and things like that. Not so, there was some support at school, not as much as there is now, I think, because I think we value the humanities and creativity a lot more across the board and throughout the country. Whereas I grew up in where I live, and I've gone back to live now in Timaru in South Canterbury, and my school had a fairly good culture record, fairly good arts record. It's a Catholic school, so there's kind of a built-in appreciation for, say, visual art and the written word. At the same time, this is a very kind of sport-oriented rugby, cricket, blah 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 kind of space. So not as much attention there as is now. And then I guess I sort of once I was in the university environment, I went to Otago. That's quite a steep learning curve on the evolution of the adult. And yeah. So I mean, there was a lot more space to explore things then, and I could, and I had access to academic resources, which helped me develop that side of things. And from there, it's sort of yeah, not a huge amount happened in that regard, and then I got a job at an art gallery in Christchurch for a year or two, and yeah, then it sort of span into lots of writing jobs, and slowly, very slowly, building up a body of work and a career. And it's only now in my late 40s that um, I'm sort of into my second coming. Not so much the fresh-faced ingenue, and things are coming together.
You've made it. You've made it there.
Does
You
anyone
know,
ever make it?
no, well, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, it's a nice journey to be on anyway. But you often review or critique or make comment on other people's work through your writing and things. And we live in a small country. Can it be difficult sometimes, to be honest, when you sort of know the scene?
Oh yeah, and I think every reviewer slash critic goes through a journey, and you start out being really cocky and wanting to make your mark, and often being quite cruel actually. And I know I was, because you want attention, for not and not so much envying the people you're reviewing, but you want to stand out in that whole critical ecosystem. And of course, you're often looking to overseas models that can be really, really bitchy and vicious. And you think, oh, that sounds very exciting. Oh, I want to be like that. And and you need to get over that fairly quickly. I'm not sure if I did get over that fairly quickly, but because it's a very small world, and it's a very small community. Um, and it's actually really important to Afi, the creatives. Uh, you have to be honest, and you have to be objective. And that's really hard to do too, because I mean, I'm lucky because I sort of stayed outside of the whole um, um, best friends thing of particularly in literature and publishing. I was always kind of outside that, so I didn't have the whole added burden of knowing everybody or being particularly close to people. So I had a bit of leeway, and could be a bit more objective. But yeah, I do find a lot of reviewing tends to be a bit gushy, or a bit too concerned about, well, what happened, what I've got to get my book out too, blah blah blah, etc. So I have to be careful what I say. I don't want to upset a major publisher, and I don't want to upset my other writers who are probably higher up the greasy pole than I am. I've never especially worried about that, because I have no filter, basically. But I am trying to be nicer and kinder and more supportive and nurturing than getting the razor blades out.
Do you believe that it's important for artists and writers or creatives to grow through hearing other people's views on their work?
Well, absolutely. I mean, anytime on the odd occasion you hear someone say, "Oh, I don't look at anything, or I don't read anything because I don't want to contaminate my style," and it's like, oh, go away. You don't have a style. You don't. How do you know you've got a style, and if you've got something to compare it to? I think that's an absolute nonsense. Um, People develop a style, people develop a unique voice, lots of ways. You're not born with a unique voice. You develop a unique voice through a kind of synthesis of everything you're exposed to, everything you read, everything you're judging yourself against, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to incorporate into your own work, what you don't want to, what you actually want to reject and see as not what you want to do. Um, there's a process I call, seeing your handwriting in someone else's writing, in the sense that you that's someone you want to write like, because you sense an affinity with their style.
Mm.
So it's all across arts and culture. I think you feel a kind of Goethe calls it an elective affinity. You choose your cultural family, and that informs a lot of what you do.
Andrew, what does your day look like? I'm wondering, with all your different hats that you wear, are you structured in your work, or do you just sort of go with the flow?
Um, I tend to go with the flow because I'm an utterly shambolic person with no structure. Usually, in the morning, I'll go through my emails and do all that sort of thing, and maybe make a rough list of things I have to do. I have I have family commitments as well. Having moved back, I've got parents who are of a certain age, and my mother certainly needs a lot more care than she has various medical issues that I have to keep an eye on sometimes. So you work around those things, and you of course have to work around your ability to um, preserve your own sanity and get out. Uh, Reading is really hard these days. I find increasingly I have less and less time to do, say, reading for pleasure. It's either I'm researching for something or I'm reviewing. Um, yeah, I mean, then it's late into the night. I think I tend to function better at night than in the morning. And so I just go and go until it's done because I don't have office hours. And probably I'll finish off with various watching YouTube. Really, I like watching lectures on from various universities and things on YouTube because it's really interesting and a good way to pad out my knowledge base.
Mm. And so, are there any tools that you've put in place that sort of help with the way that you work? And have you delved into the digital world at all to sort of give you a hand with any of that?
Um, Not so much me because I'm a bit of a Luddite and technology frightens me. Uh, I mean, Zoom is fantastic, and that the internet as a whole is fantastic because you can work from anywhere, you can access so much, you can communicate with lots of different people. It's really democratizing, and it actually, I mean, it makes it easier to say pursue contacts uh, for whatever project because it is democratizing. You're not sort of having to go through other people. It levels out that whole hierarchy, so you can pretty much approach anyone. You can't. They're not necessarily going to reply to you, but you don't have to overcome that "who are you" so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Social media is a boon and a curse because, on the one hand, again, massive accessibility, massive exposure. Um, on the other hand, I have no filter, and that's a really bad mix. Uh, and yeah, so not I, and I yeah, not so much organizing my creative and professional time. Um, it's much more about accessing information. I mean, compared to, say, when I was an undergraduate, uh, when the photocopier was quite an exciting. I'm not that old, but I mean, we had photocopiers, but it was a very useful tool. But now, I mean, I can access journals around the world. I can submit things around the world. I can contact editors around the world, approach them and say, would you be interested in my work? I've actually, things have popped off a lot in the UK. With writing about, because one of the things I like to write about is decorative arts. I like to write about porcelain and silver and um, mostly sort of earlier stuff, older stuff, so 19th and early 20th century stuff. Which is really hard to do in New Zealand because we don't have anywhere to do it, and no one's really particularly interested. Arts, yes. Craft, to an extent, yes, but antiques, not so much. And I like writing about New Zealand antiques because they're really quite interesting. And I found actually a really interested audience in the UK where they see a commonality, but also it's slightly exotic to them. And there are all these journals where you can write in a scholarly way about New Zealand antiques, and that's great, really. I've really enjoyed it. It's helped me blossom there.
I mean, that's amazing now that there's that, possibility that you can just, from the other side of the world, you can be submitting articles to someone in the UK, like that's obviously changed a lot, probably in quite a short amount of time, hasn't it? Do you just go on
I
cold?
think so. I mean, okay, Australia is way ahead of New Zealand in terms of getting over the cultural cringe. I think there's still, I think, in Aotearoa a legacy of that cultural cringe that we're still fighting against, mainly because we're so tiny. Yet we're punching well above. I hate that cliche, but it fills the gap of what I want to say. We punch above our weight, and we do. We're incredibly successful overseas. Um, I weep. I weep over current government strategies that are reining that in to some degree, or just promoting certain things that overseas. But you don't need that. You really don't need that. We can do it from here, thanks to the internet. We are a known quantity overseas. We have a good reputation in other countries, and in those big markets, and there is plenty of opportunity to make use of that. It's just be relentless, be stubborn, and be brave. And again, for me, it took a long time to do anything, but that's the way with any career in a particularly contested area, like the creative industries, the arts, the humanities. There's a lot of competition. The universities are churning out a new crop of people in your field or your area or doing what you want to do every year, and the competition's ridiculous. And you are going to get so many rejections and knockbacks, and that's just what it is. And you have to develop a rhino skin and just push on and push through, and know it's not you, and internalize that it's not you. You're not necessarily inadequate or inferior or not up to it. It's just there's so much out there you're competing with. So you really have to find your niche first. You find your niche, you make your mark, and then the doors open up from there. But it can be a very long time, and it can be very disheartening. And like if you're a writer, you'll get so many rejections before you even get your foot in the door, and it really is heartrending, and it's totally world destroying, and until you get used to it, and you just have to you do have to get used to it. It's just the nature of the business. Um, and just keep pushing through. And yeah, a good portion of it's luck, but the other big portion of it is just persistence. If you've got it, they'll find you.
Yeah, and you have managed to make a living out of, different aspects of your working life. How have you done that, and where do you get your income from?
Oh yeah, see, I wouldn't remotely say I'm typical, and I would be mortified if anyone thought I was some model to follow because I've just been incredibly lucky. Uh, and a certain amount of it is obviously ability and, dare I say, talent, but most of it has been luck in making connections, and bloody mindedness. My Most of my income actually does come from writing. Uh, I've moved back home obviously in a more of a support capacity for my family, so that's taken some of the rent burden off. That was always a big old pain in the ass. And I think everyone can identify with that. I mean, the cost of living is always going up, and rents. I would imagine most people in the creative industries are renters, and that you got to get that rent and you got to get those bills paid. I've been very lucky that for say the past I'll say nearly 10 years, I've been able to support myself through my writing work and some consultancy. But yeah, again, I'm a rare bird, and that's really unusual. Um, Most of the time, I've never had to work in the service industry or in a shop or anything like that, which I'm very grateful for because I'd be really, really awful at it because I hate people. I'm really bad with. I'm not a people person. I actually do have a very minimal part-time job in a bookshop, which is such. That sounds like a real cliche, but mainly that's for the discounts. To be fair, I only do a couple of hours a week, and a bit of sort of outside social time, really, be out and about, to be out of the house. Um, but those little things can be important too. You find ways of economizing, and anyone who's been a student, uh, basically, in many ways, if you're pursuing, but if you're being a real purist about it, it's going to be like that for a very long time. Um, you learn not to say no to things because every little bit helps, and you learn to be reasonably good at organizing yourself around getting things done. Deadlines become second nature after a while. I mean, it's a huge slog, and I think unless you sort of have independent means, as they used to say, or you're married well, um, you other jobs are basically essential until you get to that point in your career where you don't have to write CVs anymore.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like to me quite an interesting life, and you've obviously paved the way for yourself, and you're living with mum and
Well,
dad is like at that when they're older is a nice thing to do, and to be there for them. It's great.
yeah, I mean, it's the circle of life. And I can work around that because the internet's a wonderful thing, as I keep saying.
Yes.
And I'm throwing myself into the local community here, attaching myself to creative things in Timaru here, which it's not a tiny place; it's a modestly sized town, um, and getting involved here, and that's important too. You need to be involved with your community. You can't just sort of sit in an ivory tower and poo-poo everything, or roll your eyes and think you're too good to do basic stuff or be involved in community things. And that's partly the size of our country, which isn't huge, but also it's a good thing to do. And you need to give back. You need to be involved for your own sanity, and you'll probably learn something. And you never know what connection may be forged that will help you move forward in areas that you perhaps are more interested in.
Mm. I mean, yeah, you sort of made out like you're a bit curmudgeonly, but you're not at all. You've got some great advice there for people. I've just got a few quick fire questions for you. First one is what planning do you do, and who helps you stay on track?
Well, because I'm self-employed, I do all my own planning. I do kind of rely sometimes on people to remind me of things, and it's usually if something they want out of me that hopefully they will occasionally remind me. But most of the time, I'm very good with deadlines, and I organise around deadlines. So what has to be done first? What's going to take the most amount of time to do? Uh, and in and around that, it's mostly e research and experiencing and things, and just trying to be creative. Um, you will never work to schedule. No one will ever work to schedule in the creative industries. It just doesn't work that way. But you can try, and that creates some order on the chaos. But things will always come up. Things will always take longer than they should. Sometimes you'll surprise yourself and get it done really quick, or you'll be really enthusiastic and stay up all night and knock it out. Um, but yeah, structure is a flexible thing, and if you can't be flexible, it's not a good area to get into.
Yeah, very true. Now, as a creative, do you experience moments of self doubt or imposter syndrome? And if so, how do you motivate and reassure yourself to keep going?
All the bloody time. All the time. Constant anxiety. I honestly don't believe in imposter syndrome because I think it's just natural and everyone has it. I think it's just normal paranoia. I think we all feel constantly insecure and inadequate, like we shouldn't be here, and any good things that happen to us we don't deserve, and that's just the human condition, and pathologizing it into something is not helping. Um, yeah, so I'm always constantly amazed when people like something, especially if it's more in the creative area, and um, say an essay or something like that, and particularly when it goes out into the broader sphere and people are really enthusiastic about it. I'm shocked. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I'm constantly amazed that I'm actually able to make a living at this, and that I've um, reached a level where I can, particularly in, well, I mean, again, New Zealand has its pros and cons. It's actually really hard to um, get enough work sometimes, but at the same time, the networks and the contacts and the smallness of the community has its benefits, in that you kind of become the go-to person in some ways. That said, I mean, as I said, we're constantly churning out qualified people from our universities who need a niche, need a platform, need a place to go, need a space to go. One of the things I am is an editor for Takahe magazine, which is the second longest running literary magazine journal in Aotearoa. I'm the art editor, and I co-edit with my colleague Zoe Mega the comics section. And that's a fantastic model because we're big on giving feedback. We've incorporated into our identity as a publication is to not just reject people, but offer feedback and editorial advice, creative advice within that rejection, such a horrible word, but it is what it is. And also publishing emerging writers and new writers alongside established writers, which again is fantastic. We're I think quite notable for publishing new writers. Whereas I mean, new writers struggle unless you've sort of maybe gone through a certain prominent writing programs attached to universities, which have their kind of own ecosystem attached to them. It's incredibly hard to get a foothold in in any creative endeavor, but particularly writing, because again, it's extremely competitive, and that's a really good thing that I'm involved with, that I think makes a difference.
What has been one of your aha moments when you realised that the grind had paid off?
Um, I think it was when someone once said it was a few years ago, and someone once said to me, "You're really unusual because you're actually making a living doing this," and I thought, "Wow, yeah, actually." And I don't know whether I never feel like I'm amazing at it. It's I guess in some ways just being in the right place at the right time, being available, having a reputation for professionalism, getting it done, getting it done well, uh, and in a timely way. I think a lot of it's my reputation for being very fast at doing it, and a lot of that is simply you develop a formula, inevitably. You develop a body of knowledge, a formula for structuring things, whether that be a visual work of art, whether that be a piece of text, um, of where things go together. This information is useful there. I can probably find more information about that here, um, and then it just all comes together, and it comes together fairly quickly. I think that's what they call style. A style, really, is that what the style is a formula, um, and that's you just become effective and efficient and good at what you do.
I mean, as we said before, it's always really important for people to get that feedback and, be critiqued. So lastly, what has been one of your aha moments when you realised that the grind had paid off?
Um, I think it was when someone once said it was a few years ago, and someone once said to me, "You're really unusual because you're actually making a living doing this," and I thought, "Wow, yeah, actually." And I don't know whether I never feel like I'm amazing at it. It's I guess in some ways just being in the right place at the right time, being available, having a reputation for professionalism, getting it done, getting it done well, uh, and in a timely way. I think a lot of it's my reputation for being very fast at doing it, and a lot of that is simply you develop a formula, inevitably. You develop a body of knowledge, a formula for structuring things, whether that be a visual work of art, whether that be a piece of text, um, of how where things go together. This information is useful there. I can probably find more information about that here, um, and then it just all comes together, and it comes together fairly quickly. I think that's what they call style. A style, really, is that what the style is a formula, um, and that's you just become effective and efficient and good at what you do.
Andrew, thank you so much. There's so much valuable information there for people and such an interesting chat. Thanks so much for your time today. That was great.
Thank you, Sasha.